Hi, I'm Samuel C. Spitali, author of How to Win the War on Truth. In this video, we'll look at the truth about the Biden presidency. While the Trump presidency will be remembered for the mismanagement of COVID-19, 2 impeachments, and a deadly insurrection on the U.S. Capitol, the Biden presidency stands in stark contrast with the most successful domestic policy of any president since Lyndon Johnson. Biden's legislative achievements include a bipartisan infrastructure bill, which invested $300 billion to rebuild and repair 135,800 miles of roads and over 7,800 bridges, the largest investment since Dwight Eisenhower. $66 billion to expand and modernize passenger and freight rail, $39 billion to expand public transit, $25 billion to update over 190 airports, $17 billion to upgrade port and waterways infrastructure to speed up the supply chain, $11 billion to transportation safety programs, $90 billion to transition 2,400 school buses and 2,900 transit buses, as well as ferries, to zero or low emissions, $1 billion to revitalize rural communities, $65 billion for broadband infrastructure, delivering reliable high-speed internet for 20 million low-income households and building thousands of miles of transmission lines, $7.5 billion to create a national network of electric vehicle chargers, over 161,000 so far, $50 billion to prepare the nation's infrastructure for the impact of climate change, extreme weather events, and cybersecurity threats, $55 billion to clean drinking water, eliminating the hundreds of thousands of lead service lines and purifying water in schools, childcare facilities, and disadvantaged communities, $21 billion to remove pollution from bodies of water, as well as remove hazardous fuel material from 8.7 million acres of land, plug over 6,000 orphaned oil and gas wells, and fund nearly 400 projects for water recycling, storage, conservation, and desalination. The Inflation Reduction Act, which was the largest investment in combating climate change in U.S. history, estimated to reduce carbon emissions by 1 billion tons and to reach 80% clean energy by 2030, increasing solar energy sevenfold and creating more than 170,000 clean energy jobs, lowered energy costs by 9% and gas prices by 13%, allowed Medicare to negotiate drug prices, cap insulin at $35 a month, and cap out-of-pocket prescription expenses at $2,000 a year, provided free vaccines for Medicare and Medicaid, lowered Affordable Care Act premiums by an average of $800 a year, provided additional funding to the IRS to create a free electronic tax filing system and allow them to go after millionaire and corporate tax cheats, collecting $150 billion in unpaid taxes. The American Rescue Plan, to offset the effects of the pandemic, which extended unemployment insurance, increased the child tax credit and dependent tax credit, lowered health insurance premiums, provided emergency grants to small businesses, and provided free COVID vaccinations. The CHIPS and Science Act, which boosts semiconductor research, development, and production, and invests in high-tech manufacturing, including clean energy, wireless supply chains, artificial intelligence, biotechnology, quantum computing, and STEM education, training, and innovation to ensure that America remains competitive in technologies of the future. The PACT Act, perhaps the largest healthcare and benefit expansion in VA history, which expands VA healthcare for victims of burn pits, Agent Orange, and other toxic substances from the Vietnam War, Gulf War, and post 9/11 wars. It requires the VA to provide toxic exposure screenings to all veterans and eliminates delays for benefits. Biden has also proposed a voucher program to end veteran homelessness, expanded access to legal assistance for homeless veterans, helped thousands avoid home foreclosure, expanded mental health screenings, and helped returning vets secure jobs. Biden's expansion of consumer protections include banning medical debt from credit reports, cracking down on junk fees hidden in event tickets, hotels and lodging, and apartment and car rentals, limiting the amount banks can charge for overdraft fees and restricting the types of fees big banks can charge, capping credit card late fees, requiring airlines to refund and compensate flyers for canceled or delayed flights, making it easier to cancel recurrent charges such as unwanted subscriptions or gym memberships, expanding overtime protections to low-salaried workers, and banning non-compete clauses that prohibit employees from working for competitors. Other achievements include preserving 24 million acres of public lands through his America the Beautiful initiative, protecting same-sex and interracial marriage in the Respect for Marriage Act, adding 14,000 psychologists, counselors, and social workers to U.S. schools, establishing the first ever Office of Gun Violence Prevention, introducing safe storage model legislation to hold individuals liable for harm caused by unsecured firearms, and lost and stolen firearms reporting model legislation to prosecute firearm trafficking, and forgiving up to $20,000 in student loan debt for the 4.75 million student loan borrowers saddled with over $1.6 trillion in debt. And all of these initiatives cost less than the Trump tax cuts, which added $2.3 trillion to the national debt, creating more debt than any non-wartime president in U.S. history. Trump's tax cuts almost exclusively benefited the super rich. For instance, Trump cut corporate taxes from 35% to 21%, and corporations responded not by investing in economic expansion or hiring, but by buying back their own stock, a record $1.31 trillion in 2022 alone, which inflated the stock value, making the wealthy even wealthier, and leaving the working class responsible for 86% of federal tax revenue. Biden, on the other hand, invested in the middle and lower classes, and that investment is paying off. In 2023, Americans filed a record-breaking 5.5 million new business applications, the third consecutive year of new business growth, and the highest on record, for a total of 16 million new business applications in 3 years. Contrary to popular belief, the wealthy are not job creators as much as the middle class is, as over 50% of new businesses are started with less than $25,000 in seed money, and 69% are started at home. Biden's economy has grown to nearly 10% larger than under Donald Trump's before the pandemic, and Biden's unemployment rate averaged 3.6% in 2022 and 2023, the lowest since 1969. Meanwhile, Trump actually had the worst jobs record of any president on record, with more than 3 million jobs lost, while Biden has seen an increase of 6 million jobs. That's the 3 million Trump lost, plus an additional 3 million. Under Biden, wage gains have finally exceeded that of inflation, due in large part to the administration's pro-labor policy decisions. Inflation overall, however, is still hurting Americans' pocketbooks, but while its initial cause was related to the pandemic, global supply chain problems, and the war in Ukraine, it's since been fueled just as much by corporate greed, which is why some economists have taken to calling it greedflation. Economists have found that more than half of recent price increases were caused by high corporate profits, the highest profits ever recorded, and the highest profit margins in 70 years, using the cover of the pandemic to price gouge consumers. Since 1980, price markups, the difference between a product's retail price and how much it costs to make, have more than tripled, rising from 21% above cost to 72% by the end of 2022. This is partly because of corporate consolidation, allowing companies to merge with other companies in the same market space. When there are fewer businesses in an industry, this means less competition, leading to monopoly power, which leads to price fixing. Thankfully, the Biden administration has begun taking anti-monopoly action against such economic behemoths as Amazon, Apple, Google, Facebook, Live Nation, Kroger, and Albertsons. But to continue tackling inflation, we need more politicians that prioritize the needs of citizens over corporations. But perhaps the one black mark on Biden's domestic policy record has been the U.S.-Mexico border, where migrant encounters hit a record high in 2022. When Biden first got into office, he reversed some of the more inhumane policies of the Trump administration, which turned away asylum seekers and separated at least 5,000 children from their families and locked them in cages, of which 2,000 kids have still not been reunited with their parents. Over 50 asylum seekers died in custody, at least 6 of whom were children, and nearly all of which were preventable. To address the surge at the border, Biden has repeatedly asked Congress for funding for border enforcement, which would include more Border Patrol agents, more immigration judges, and detection technology at ports of entry, as well as addressing the root causes of migration, such as climate change and economic instability. Yet congressional Republicans have not only refused, but voted to cut Customs and Border Protection funding and block passage of a bipartisan, Biden-supported border security bill at the behest of Donald Trump, in order for them to campaign on the border crisis. And then there's the crime rate. If you consume partisan media, you might think that crime is off the charts, but the reality is quite the opposite. Although homicides increased 30% between 2019 and 2020, and hate crimes increased 12%, the crime wave that began under Trump subsided soon after he left office. Under Biden, the crime rate continues to fall. Violent crime, which includes homicide, rape, robbery, and aggravated assault, is now at a 50-year low. Between 2022 and 2023, all types of crime went down, except for auto theft, which was the sole exception. And even though right-wing media devote an inordinate amount of time to crime committed by undocumented immigrants, they are significantly less likely to commit crime than native-born citizens. But by highlighting the few exceptions, they give the impression that they're the norm, preying on their audience's fears to drive them to vote for tough-on-crime politicians who promise to make them safe again, a tactic pioneered by Richard Nixon. The Biden administration is probably most remarkable for its lack of scandals, controversies, or criminal convictions, unlike his predecessor, who racked up 88 criminal charges since leaving office and has been found guilty of 34 for paying hush money to a porn star. Trump was found guilty of fraud several times over and fined hundreds of millions of dollars, and 45 individuals serving in the Trump administration, campaign, and organization have been criminally indicted, racking up a staggering 335 criminal charges so far. By comparison, in Joe Biden's 4 years as president, 8 years as VP, and 36 years in the Senate, he's had 0 investigations, indictments, or convictions. Ditto for Barack Obama. After trust in the U.S. plummeted during the Trump years, it has rebounded during the Biden administration. The world's faith in the U.S. may be temporarily restored, but we are not out of the woods yet. In 2016, the U.S. was downgraded from a full democracy to a flawed democracy. And after Trump's insurrection in 2021, the U.S. was downgraded yet again and is no longer the world's oldest continuous democracy. That distinction now belongs to Switzerland. The U.S. is now what they call an anocracy, a form of government somewhere between a democracy and an autocratic state. While Biden's tenure hasn't been perfect, he's corrected course over the disastrous policies of the Trump presidency. And he stands on the right side of our most pressing issues: reducing pollution, curbing global warming, improving access to healthcare, addressing inequality, protecting civil rights, bringing much-needed jobs, and investing in the future. But this is only a start. If we really want to make America great again, with a middle class receiving a bigger chunk of the economic pie, then it means expanding on these policies, not reversing them. We need corporations in the 1% to pay their fair share of taxes, not give them more tax breaks so they can further enrich themselves. We need a statesman who protects the rights of women, minorities, and asylum seekers, not strips them of their rights, nor scapegoats them for political power, which leads to an increase in hate crimes. And we need a president who appoints judges who represent these values, prioritizing democracy over autocracy, consumers over corporations, and the marginalized over the privileged. If you enjoyed this video or know someone who would benefit from watching it, please share. And for more on media literacy, misinformation, and myth debunking, be sure to check out my book, How to Win the War on Truth. And thank you for watching.